Hey guys, it's Cole, and I was fortunate enough to try out the Viper as a part of the media tour, and so welcome to my guide to the Viper going into Dawntrail. To summarize the gameplay of the Viper is that you are going to be playing like super quick. There is going to be combo action after combo action after combo action. You're going to go this combo path down that combo path, and you're going to really slither your way through all of the different paths and chains, and there is just so much going on with the Viper, and it has such amazing speed and flow to it. It felt really rewarding and really slick to play. Like, the level of polish on the Viper when I was playing it was just like super intense. I was like, oh whoa. However, that doesn't mean that it's like super duper crazy basic. There is definitely a flow to it, and when you get it down, it definitely makes a lot of sense. But in this guide, as you're gonna see, I'm gonna inch us in slowly, piece by piece by piece, because the Viper really does have a lot that it's juggling. But once you get it down what you want, it becomes super duper natural. And so if you like fast DPS, you like a lot of mobility, you like doing a whole lot of things, the Viper is going to be super good. It feels almost like a twist of like Machinist with Monk with Dragoon if I had to pick like anything to correlate. But with that, I'm going to do my best to ease everyone into the Viper's core mechanics, and I've written this guide over a few times and hopefully make it a little bit easier to digest. So let's start off with the buffs and debuffs that you want to maintain. This may seem unorthodox to talk about this before even a basic rotation, but in order to understand why the basic rotation is the way it is important to get a grasp on this. At all times, you're going to want to maintain the two buffs, Swiftscaled and Hunter's Instinct, that are self buffs, as well as the Noxious Gnash on any target that you are fighting. Think of Noxious Gnash as similar to Reaper's Death's Design debuff. Noxious Gnash is going to amplify the damage that you deal to a target by 10%. You can max out the duration of the debuff on the target up to 40 seconds. Any abilities that have Dread in the name will apply this Noxious Gnash debuff to the target. This is include abilities like Dread Fangs, Dread Maw, and Dread Winder. Swiftscaled is going to be our second buff, and it's going to be a self buff that reduces your weapon skill recast time and auto attack speed by 15%. So it's just like more attack speed, your GCD is going to be lower, and it's definitely something you want to maintain. Samurai has something very similar in its kit. This is going to be given from abilities with Swift Skin in their name. This is going to involve abilities such as Swiftskin's Coil. Our third thing to look out for is Hunter's Instinct, and it's going to be a self buff that increases your own damage by 10%. This is your own self buff, and it isn't the same thing as the Noxious Gnash 10% damage taken up debuff that you're applying to enemies. So you're going to want to stack all of these up alongside Swiftscaled for the most damage possible. So just keep it in mind whenever we're going through the rotation thing, that this is definitely something that you want to flow through. And so you're really slithering through these different rotational pathways, like kind of like a Viper, I guess. Is that too stupid? But I think it fits. I mean, it's kind of true. Now we can talk about the basic bread and butter single target rotation for the Viper. This single target rotation could be entered using either Steel Fangs or Dread Fangs. Both work to enter it. Dread Fangs does less direct damage than Steel Fangs, but applies that Noxious Gnash debuff to the target. From there, both Steel Fangs and Dread Fangs can go to either Hunter Sting or Swiftskin Sting, but the only difference between these two abilities is that Hunter Sting gives you the Hunter's Instinct buff, and Swiftskin Sting gives you the Swiftscaled buff. From there, Hunter Sting can go either into Flank Sting Strike or Flank's Bane Fang. This is their third and final piece of their basic rotation, and it's worth noting that both Hunter Sting abilities should be executed from the flank. So the difference between these two Flank Sting and Flank's Bane abilities, I guess that's kind of in their name, isn't it, to execute from the flank? I just wanted to make sure I said it. But it's that Flank Sting Strike will buff the other single target rotation finishers with buffs. So Flank Sting Strike will buff the damage of your next Hind Sting Strike, and Flank's Bane Fang will buff your next Hind's Bane Fang, which those are going to be abilities that are the third combo piece finisher after Swiftskin Sting ability. So really what we're seeing here with like Flank Sting Strike, Flank's Bane Fang abilities is that these will be like buffs to the other single target rotation finishers with their buffs. So after the Swiftskin Sting ability, these two abilities in the combo chain deal the most damage when executed from the target's rear, and that is again indicated in the name. For Hind Sting Strike, it works on reverse, that it buffs Flank's Bane Fang by 100 potency, and Hind's Bane Fang will buff Flank's Bane Fang. Very much this is the final third combo piece with these four different abilities, and it boils down to being a game of back and forth to amplify the next combo. That is generally how you can think about this. Outside of that, these third combo finishers will give you 10 Serpent's offerings gauge. We're going to be talking about that later, or you can zip ahead based on the timestamp. It's also worth saying that at the end of every one of these rotations that you're going to get one execution of the ability called Death Rattle. This is specifically the single target rotation that gives Death Rattle, and this turns into the generic skill, or transforms the generic skill Serpent's Tail into Death Rattle, and that is just more single target damage. What's awesome is that this ability is off the GCD, and so it's just a simple off GCD wave, and that is great. Now, I did mention the name generic, and we're going to have a section in this video dedicated to it. It's basically an ability that transforms into a different ability. It's kind of like to reduce hotkey bloat. Now let's get into the basic AoE rotation, which honestly shares the incredible majority of its complexity with the single target that we just talked over. So you still want to maintain those 2 buffs and 1 debuff on the targets that you're hitting. So you can also, with the AoE rotation, go to any finisher or any combo piece from any previous combo piece. I know my beautiful red arrows and skill art is marvelous. My art skills are amazing. But what I'm trying to say is that you're not constrained here. The third combo piece, similar to the single target rotation, has a buff that buffs the other AoE combo piece. AoE definitely is more simple and streamlined than the kind of honestly more convoluted single target with 4 different combo pieces, so now you're down to 2. The basic AoE also has a payoff in that you get to cast the off GCD ability Last Lash. The single target gets that Death Rattle, and then AoE gets Last Lash. Now we're going to be talking about what I'm going to call single target charge time spenders, and there is what I'm going to call a mini single target rotation that is on a 40-second recharge time, and you can store up to 2 of the charges to initiate it. What is special about these 40-second charge rotations is that they will give you 1 stack of a buff named Rattling Coil that we will talk about later. You initiate this by using the Dreadwinder skill that will give you the Noxious Gnash debuff onto the target that you're facing, but this will also grant you a Rattling Coil, which is a very special buff that we're going to be talking about later, or you can obviously skip to that part of the video if you want a timestamp. Timestamps are available in the description, but also be aware that you can only store up to 3 Rattling Coils, so you can definitely overcap them and waste them if you aren't spending them here. From Dreadwinder, you can enter into Hunter's Coil and then into Swiftscaled Coil, or alternatively, you can enter Swiftscaled Coil and then go into Hunter's Coil. And no, that's not a mistake. You have the same 2 skills that can be flipped dependent on the buffs that you're going to be going into this rotation combo with. Before I explain that, both Swiftscaled Coil and Hunter's Coil will give you 5 Serpent's offering gauge, as well as transform your generic skills Twin Blood and Twin Fang into Twin Fang Bite and Twin Blood Bite. So Hunter's Coil is a flank skill, so from the side, that you will give the Hunter Instinct buff and give you Hunter's Venom that is going to increase the potency of Twin Fang Bite, which is something that I'll get into more later, but it's a special state that one of your generic skills, which is the generic Twin Fang skill, gets that does, and it does damage off of the GCD as it's an ability, and that is also going to give you Swiftscaled Venom. Now, the next one is Swiftscaled Coil, which is going to be a rear skill you execute from behind, and you give the Swiftscaled personal buff as well as the Swiftscaled Venom buff, which is going to boost the power of Twin Blood Bite by 100. This will change that generic Twin Fang skill into Twin Fang Bite and generic Twin Blood skill into Twin Blood Bite. So Twin Fang Bite and Twin Blood Bite are different from one another in that Twin Fang Bite will buff your next Twin Blood Bite's damage, and so your Twin Blood Bite will then buff your next Twin Fang Bite. They don't really elaborate on those buffs on the tooltips down below, but you can cite those buff effects through the image shown on the skills above. Fundamentally, boiling down some of the terms, because there is a lot of fangs, a lot of twin, and a lot of stuff here. Fundamentally, this is juggling around back and forth through these buff procs that push you to use the other side of the skills. Very similar to what we were talking about before, you were like a Viper slithering through these different rotations, and these buff procs are going to give you more damage and inspire you to check out the other parts of the rotation. Really, they're just pushing you to use the other side of the skills, rather than say spamming Twin Fang Bite or always going into Dreadwinder, into Hunter's Coil, into Swiftscaled Coil. This, in theory, this back and forth flow is done through those potency gain buffs, and so the skills that you need to press for the additional potency will also be highlighted, as well as you do get a special gauge. It's the one with the swords that helps, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Now let's talk about what I'm going to call the special AoE rotation. which is very similar to the single target special rotation with the charges. You're going to get 2 charges of Pit of Dread, which is shared with the single target. So this will apply the Noxious Gash debuff onto the targets, and you'll get 1 charge every 40 seconds, just the same as before. And from there, you will be able to enter into either Hunter's Den or Swiftscaled Den, and the one you want to go with is whatever one has the potency buff. Same idea as the single target rotations and, well, the rest of Vipersight, honestly. Swiftscaled Den will grant you a Swiftscaled buff and Fellskin's Venom that increases Twin Blood Thresh's potency, which, you guessed it, generic skills exist here too, with Twin Fang becoming Twin Fang Thresh and Twin Blood becoming Twin Blood Thresh. Swiftscaled Den can be first and then lead into Hunter's Den, and Hunter's Den could have the opposite, and then Hunter's Den leads into Swiftscaled Den. I get people probably understand the drill if they want you to go back and forth with these combo systems, so I'm just making sure that I don't leave that detail out because I know that people will ask in the comments for sure. Just remember to use those off GCD abilities though on the generics, don't let them go to waste. Now with that, we're done talking about the fundamental rotations, and now let's explore the gauges and those mechanics associated with them. Vipersight is going to be the first gauge that we're talking about here because it will make things a whole lot more sense and help you keep track of things. Depending on how this twin sword gauge glows, you can see whether you lean into the left half of the combo or the right half, or alternatively you could even get both in some cases. But more than likely you're also going to be able to follow the hotkeys that are flashing and glowing at the same time. Now, on the sword gauge, you also see 3 dots, and these are going to be the Rattling Coil charges that you saw me mention and probably see all in the tooltips earlier, where you're going to get Rattling Coil from those charge rotations, AOE, or single target. So roughly, you can expect 1 Rattling Coil every 40 seconds or so based on the charges and that system. And so you are going to spend Rattling Coils on what is called Uncoiled Fury. And so Uncoiled Fury is both also doing very high damage on the global cooldown as it's a weapon skill, but it also grants you an effect called Poised for Twin Fang, which will simply amplify the damage of Uncoiled Twin Fang, but it will cost 1 Rattling Coil, so this is kind of like a bursty spender is how you could think about this. This will then lead from Uncoiled Fury into Uncoiled Twin Fang as an off the GCD ability that deals AoE damage and gives you Poised for Twin Blood, which increases the damage of Uncoiled Twin Blood by 100. So at this point, it is also very much worth saying that Uncoiled Twin Blood is also an off GCD, and I remember during the Media Tour event I was recommended to just piano key them, and so yeah, it's kind of like Uncoiled Fury has that 3.5 second GCD window to kind of give you wiggle room, so I guess to really allow this weave. But remember that that's also lowered by your snake skin buff, giving you that attack speed increase, and so your GCD is a little lower. So yeah, in my experience, you do really want to piano key them. The next gauge is going to be the Serpent's Ire gauge. This gauge is where all of that Serpent's Ire that you collected through the rest of rotations that we talked about, where you get 5 here, 10 there, this is where it's all going to go, and it's going to be, how to say it? To be extremely direct, this gauge is remarkably similar to Machinist's Overheat, Heat Blast Burst phase with Gauss Round Ricochet Weaves, or Reaper's Enshrouded would be another example, so you will be super familiar with it if you've tried either of those. So once you've obtained 50 of the Serpent's Ire gauge, you can activate the skill called Reawakened that will consume 50 gauge and give you 5 of what is called Anguin tributes. These Anguin tributes are then spent on special skills called generation skills. You will cast a set of skills called those generation skills that are weapon skills that are going to be on the global cooldown. Between those generation skills, you will weave in the off GCD window space off the global cooldown abilities named legacy skills. So these, how to say it, for both the generation and the legacy skills, you will get 4 of them. One, it's going to be first generation, legacy, second generation, second legacy, third generation, third legacy, fourth generation, and fourth legacy. So it's kind of, I know people would probably want me to say so on and so forth there, but yeah, you get 4 of them, and you don't want to miss the weaves. So this will then land you after the 4th generation legacy and your big finisher for the Reawakened state called Ouroboros, and that is an off the global cooldown weapon skill that does 1000 potency of damage and has some like applying an AoE around the target at diminished returns. But the Reawakened state does go away once you land Ouroboros, so it's also worth noting at this point that it is possible to mess this up. So if you don't land Ouroboros with the 5th charge of Anguin tributes, or if you use Ouroboros too early, so just use Ouroboros on the 5th and don't forget to use it. Now I want a dedicated section towards Viper's generic abilities, because those generic abilities are very important and a place that you definitely want to make sure that you are very comfortable with these skills on your hotbar for the Viper. The first is going to be Twin Fang, and depending on the status effects and what part of rotation you're in, you can turn into Twin Fang Bite, Twin Fang Thresh, or Uncoiled Twin Fang. Serpent's Tail is the second generic and can become Death Rattle, Last Slash, or any of the legacy skills, first legacy, second legacy, third legacy, fourth legacy, and so you will be spamming this button a lot during your Reawakened phase. Twin Blood is the third and final generic and will change into Twin Blood Bite, Twin Blood Thresh, or Uncoiled Twin Blood. These abilities basically are just like hotkey button reduction functions that help reduce Final Fantasy XIV's button bloat for the Viper job, so definitely put them somewhere comfortable. So now let's talk about other abilities for the Viper, and we're going to start off with the easiest of them all, which is called Serpent's Ire, and it's going to be your 2-minute raid buff window burst cooldown, which will simply give you a stack of Rattling Coil and put you in the state called Ready to Awaken, which will allow you to freely cast Reawaken, and then you will go into your generational legacy combo without any gauge. This works similar to the reworked Machinist Barrow Stabilizer or reworked Red Mage Magnification and other examples, in that rather than granting you 50 gauge that could potentially overcap, now it's just going to be a buff that you spend and get into that big spender phase. Next up is Slither, and this is the mobility ability that allows up to 3 charges and lets you transport yourself to the target's location, whether that's a target party member or an enemy. It's pretty nice, extremely straightforward, which is great. Now let's talk about a potential opener for the Viper, and as is tradition, we would want to wait a few GCD when combat starts before popping our big cooldowns and potion, because it's usually 3 or so GCD until Scholar pops, Chain Stratagem, Astralogen, pops Divination, and all of the other raid buffs go out, and so this lets us go into our basic single target rotation a little bit, which for Viper is super convenient and great, because that means we get to cast Dread Fangs, which gives the target 10% damage up from ourselves, and Noxious Gnash, and into Swiftscaled Sting, which is going to give us Swiftscaled personal buff that increases our attack speed, and so that is going to lower our global cooldowns, and so we can stuff more into that raid buff window, and we can more than likely get through a full 1-2-3 combo on the GCD here on Viper before the raid buff window goes out, and so we could end in Hind Sting Strike or Hind's Bane Fang, whichever, it really doesn't matter, and then we go into weaving Death Rattle off the GCD, but hold off on weaving that until the raid buffs are out, and from there we can then expend a charge on our special single target rotation here, not the main one, I'm talking about that special one with Dreadwinder into Hunter's Coil and Swiftscaled Coil, but I think I might want to wait until the raid buffs are out to do that, and particularly even after our Reawakened combo, but I don't think it really matters too much, but I think that I would generally err towards after the Reawakened combo, because we don't really want to misalign our Serpent's Ire 2-minute cooldown with the rest of the raid, and it honestly is a super cool combo to go into, so definitely I'd wait a bit, and also we also don't want to lose the potency from the raid buff window, which has been extended for many buffs in Dawntrail to last 20 seconds for the raid buffs, so because the single target rotation that you get from the charge is gonna do so much potency as well as off GCD potencies, I don't really want to waste that by using that before the window. However, this could be a very viable way to get your personal 10% damage buff, so keep that in mind for sure, because when you're going into the Reawakened state, you really do want to make sure that you have that debuff on the target for 10%. You want to make sure that you have your buff for 10% attack speed, or 15% attack speed, my apologies, and then 10% personal damage, and so maybe casting a charge just to get that would be worth it. Although that would require Dreadwinder and then Hunter's Coil, and then that Hunter's Coil gives you that Hunter's Instinct, and so possibly that would be something that I'd stuff before Reawakened, now that I think about it. I'm so sorry guys, I'm like running out of time. I'm like crunching this to the wire of when they're gonna lift the embargo, and I'm like, oh my god. But after all of that, and after your Reawakened combo, definitely make sure that you're spending as many charges, as many OGCDs into here, because as is standard with the raid buff window, any potency that goes in there is so much more valuable than any potency given out, so throw in everything, and this is gonna also align with 2-minute windows. So I'm gonna end this video by saying that the Viper is a really cool melee DPS that I do think shakes up things a little bit, but I also think is like comfortably familiar. Like if you're coming from Reaper or Machinist, you already kind of know what to expect from the Reawakened gauge, but how it flows through the combos, like slithering through them, is what I said earlier, is very neat feeling. It feels very refined, it feels very like smooth. It feels very smooth. I definitely can say that the Viper is a melee DPS that I definitely really like, and as someone who doesn't traditionally play much melee DPS, I think that's actually saying a lot. I think that this is a very refined job that I think a lot of people will enjoy. I think, however, that the sheer daunting list of skills might intimidate some people, but I think if you listen to this video a few times and go through the general mechanics, that you're going to get a pretty good feel for it, and then you're going to be super comfortable. With that, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I am editing this literally with like 3 hours to go. I need to go. See you.